Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Steady English Stories. Close your eyes for a moment, my friend. Picture this. It is the summer of 1776. You are standing on a dusty street in Philadelphia. The air is thick and warm. Flies buzz near an open window. Inside a plain brick building, a group of tired, sweating men sit around a wooden table, arguing. Outside, in the distance, you can hear wagon wheels on cobblestones and the shouts of merchants selling bread and cloth. These men are not kings. They are not soldiers, at least not yet. They are farmers, lawyers, printers, and merchants. And in this small, hot room, they are about to do something almost unthinkable. They are about to tell the most powerful empire on earth, Great Britain, that they will not obey it anymore. Why would a small group of ordinary men risk everything, their homes, their families, even their own lives, to challenge the mightiest king in the world? My friend, what you are picturing is the birth of a nation. Today, that nation is one of the most powerful countries on earth. But in the summer of 1776, it did not exist yet. It was only an idea, written in ink, on paper, by frightened, hopeful men. This is the story of the Declaration of Independence. And if stories like this one help you learn English, please subscribe to Steady English Stories. It costs you nothing, and it helps our small community of English learners grow. Now, my friend, let us go back to the true beginning. Long before 1776, the land we now call the United States was made of 13 separate colonies. A colony is a piece of land controlled by another, more powerful country far away. These 13 colonies belonged to Great Britain. The people living there were British subjects. They spoke English. They followed British laws. Many of them were proud to be part of the British Empire, but slowly, quietly, something began to change. Britain needed money. Fighting wars across the ocean, including a long, expensive war against France, had emptied the king's treasury. A treasury, my friend, simply means the place where a government keeps and manages its money. So the British government decided the colonies should help pay for it. New taxes appeared, one after another. A tax on paper, a tax on tea, a tax on almost everything the colonists bought or sold. The colonists grew frustrated. They had no representatives, no voice in the British Parliament, the group of leaders who created these laws. Think about that, my friend. Taxes were being decided for them, without them. A simple phrase began spreading through the colonies like fire through dry grass. No taxation without representation. It meant, simply, do not make us pay for laws we never had a chance to vote on. Have you ever felt like decisions were being made about your life without anyone asking your opinion first? At first, the colonists only wanted fairness. They were not yet dreaming of a new country. They still saw themselves as loyal British subjects, simply asking their king to listen. They wrote letters. They held peaceful protests. In Boston, angry colonists once dumped an entire shipment of British tea into the harbor. Rather than pay the tax on it, an event you may already know as the Boston Tea Party. But Britain did not respond with understanding. It responded with punishment. More soldiers arrived in the colonies. More laws restricted colonial freedom. And slowly, a quiet fear began to grow among ordinary colonists. Perhaps fairness was no longer possible. Perhaps the only path forward was separation, a complete, frightening break from the only government they had ever known. In April of 1775, that fear turned into gunfire. British soldiers and colonial fighters clashed in the towns of Lexington and Concord in Massachusetts. Nobody knows for certain who fired the very first shot that day. But once it happened, there was no going back. War had begun, a war the small, poorly equipped colonies had almost no realistic chance of winning against the world's strongest military power. Can you imagine, my friend, the fear of picking up a weapon against the greatest army on earth, with almost no army of your own? For over a year, the colonies fought without any clear, shared purpose. Some colonists still hoped for peace with Britain. Others wanted full independence. The 13 colonies were divided, uncertain, and afraid. They needed something powerful enough to unite them, a single, clear voice that could explain to their own people and to the entire world exactly why they were fighting. In June of 1776, a quiet, thoughtful young lawyer from Virginia was given an enormous task. His name was Thomas Jefferson. He was only 33 years old. A small committee of 5 men asked him to write a document explaining, once and for all, why the colonies deserved to become free and independent. Jefferson did not see himself as a great hero. He was known as a shy man, more comfortable writing quietly alone than speaking loudly in public. Yet somewhere inside this reserved young man was a talent that would soon shape the future of an entire nation. For 17 days, in a small rented room, Thomas Jefferson sat alone with his pen, his ink, and his thoughts. What do you think a shy, 33-year-old lawyer could possibly write, powerful enough to change the world forever? For 17 days, Jefferson wrote quietly, but he was not inventing brand new ideas from nothing. He was gathering thoughts that had been floating through Europe for decades, ideas from philosophers who believed that ordinary people, not kings, held the true right to govern themselves. Jefferson took these complex philosophical ideas and turned them into something simple, clear, and unforgettable. He opened with a sentence that would echo for centuries, that all men are created equal, and that they are given certain rights. Nobody can rightfully take away rights to life, to liberty, and to the pursuit of happiness. Liberty, my friend, simply means freedom, and unalienable, a word Jefferson used, means something so basic and so personal that no government has the right to remove it from you. Isn't it remarkable, my friend, that words written quietly in a small rented room could still be quoted, admired, and debated 250 years later? After his opening, Jefferson filled page after page with a long list of specific complaints against King George III of Britain. He accused the king of ignoring fair laws, of taxing the colonies without their consent, and of sending soldiers to threaten ordinary families in their own homes. This list served an important purpose. It was not enough to simply say, "We want to be free." Jefferson needed to prove, clearly and specifically, why freedom had become absolutely necessary. When Jefferson finished his draft, he brought it to a small committee, and eventually to the entire Continental Congress, the group of representatives from all 13 colonies. And here, my friend, the story takes an uncomfortable turn. 1. This channel believes in telling honestly. Jefferson's original draft included a passionate paragraph condemning the slave trade. However, delegates from southern colonies, whose economies depended heavily on enslaved labor, objected strongly. After difficult debate, Congress removed this passage entirely. The document that declared all men are created equal would be approved while slavery continued to exist across the very colonies declaring their freedom. This contradiction, one this channel will not hide from you, would remain a deep, painful wound in this new nation's story for generations afterward. What do you think it means when the words we write are more beautiful than the reality we are actually living? On July 2, 1776, the Continental Congress voted. 12 colonies voted yes. New York, still waiting for official permission from home, abstained, meaning they chose not to vote either way for now. 2 days later, on July 4, 1776, Congress formally adopted the final wording of the Declaration of Independence. This is the date Americans still celebrate today. Now, my friend, here is something many people do not realize. The famous signing moment, often shown in paintings with 56 men proudly gathered around a table, did not actually happen all in a single day. Most delegates signed over the following weeks and months. But one signature, added early, became legendary. John Hancock, the President of the Congress, signed his name in huge, bold letters. Legend says he wrote it so large that King George could read it without his glasses. We cannot know if this story is completely true, but it captures something real, a defiant, almost fearless spirit. And this fearlessness came at a terrifying cost. Every man who signed that document was committing an act of treason against the British Crown, treason meaning betrayal of one's own government, a crime that in Britain at that time was punishable by death. These 56 men were not simply expressing an opinion. They were risking their homes, their fortunes, and quite literally, their necks. Have you ever had to make a decision so bold, my friend, that there was truly no safe way to turn back afterward? Word of the declaration spread quickly across the 13 colonies. In New York City, a large statue of King George on horseback was pulled down by an excited crowd. Its metal later melted down and turned into musket balls for the Continental Army. In town squares, from Massachusetts to Georgia, the document was read aloud to gathering crowds, many hearing, for the very first time, the reasons their neighbors, sons, and husbands were now willing to die for a brief, shining moment. Unity and hope spread across the colonies like warm sunlight after a long storm. Ordinary farmers and shopkeepers now saw themselves not simply as rebellious subjects, but as citizens of something entirely new, a nation built not on royal blood, but on a shared idea. But my friend, declaring independence on paper and actually winning independence on a battlefield were two very different challenges. The Continental Army was small, poorly supplied, and standing against the most powerful military force in the entire world. The proud, hopeful summer of 1776 was about to give way to some of the darkest, coldest, most desperate years these colonies would ever face. What do you think happens when a beautiful, hopeful idea must now survive years of hunger, cold, and war to actually come true? The years that followed were brutal, my friend. In the winter of 1777, General George Washington and his ragged Continental Army made camp at a place called Valley Forge in Pennsylvania. Nearly 1 in 5 soldiers there died that winter, not from British bullets, but from cold, hunger, and disease. Soldiers wrapped bleeding, frost-bitten feet in torn cloth because they had no proper boots. Many historians believe the army came dangerously close to simply falling apart from suffering alone. Long before any battle could finish it, can you imagine, my friend, holding on to a hopeful idea while your body is freezing and your stomach is empty? Slowly, painfully, things began to turn. France, still resentful toward Britain from earlier wars, agreed to support the young American cause with money, soldiers, and warships. This alliance gave Washington's exhausted army the extra strength it desperately needed. Years of hard fighting continued, moving up and down the coast, through forests and farmland, until finally, in 1781, British forces found themselves trapped at a place called Yorktown in Virginia, surrounded by American and French troops on land and blocked by French ships at sea. The British commander had no way to escape. He surrendered 2 years later, in 1783. Britain formally recognized what the Declaration had already promised on paper 7 years earlier. The 13 colonies were now a free, independent nation, my friend. Here is where our story reaches its true peak, and yet, like so many peaks in history, this one carried a hidden cost sitting quietly beneath the celebration. The document that had declared all men equal had been written, fought for, and finally won, while slavery still legally existed across the new nation. The contradiction Jefferson's committee had quietly buried years earlier did not disappear simply because independence had been achieved. It remained unresolved, a wound waiting patiently beneath the surface of this new country's proud beginning. What do you think happens to a promise that is written down, celebrated, and admired long before it is actually kept? That wound would take generations to even begin healing. Decades later, it would help ignite. A century later, it would still be driving ordinary citizens into the streets, demanding that all men are created equal, finally include people who had been excluded from that promise since the very beginning, enslaved people, women, and many others, still waiting for the nation to fully live up to its own founding words. This, my friend, is perhaps the most human part of this entire story. The Declaration of Independence was never a perfect, finished creation. It was, and still is, an unfinished promise, one that each new generation must choose to keep working toward. Thomas Jefferson himself was not a perfect man. He wrote beautifully about liberty and equality, and yet he personally enslaved hundreds of people throughout his life, never fully freeing most of them. This is an uncomfortable truth, but an honest one, and I think it deserves to be said plainly, without excuses and without judgment from us. Looking back from such a different time, so my friend, what is the lesson hidden inside this long, remarkable story? I think it is this: great ideas are rarely delivered to the world already complete and perfect. They arrive small, flawed, and unfinished, carried forward by imperfect people in an imperfect moment. And then, generation after generation, ordinary people must keep returning to that idea, testing it, questioning it, and slowly, patiently, pulling it closer to what it always claimed to be. This is exactly like your own English learning journey, my friend. Your English today is not required to be complete or perfect. It is allowed to be unfinished, just as this nation's own promise was unfinished on that hot summer day in 1776. What matters is that you keep returning to it, sentence by sentence, story by story, slowly pulling your own understanding closer to the fluent, confident speaker you are becoming. If this story helped you today, please give this video a like and subscribe to Steady English Stories so you never miss our next journey together. And I would love to know which part of this story surprised you the most. Tell me in the comments below. Until next time, my friends, keep learning.